going to talk this morning about Michael Porter's 3 generic strategies. And this is kind of a general market concept about what market a company is going to strategically attack and shoot for as the market they serve. And the 3 that Michael Porter identifies are a low-cost position, a differentiation position, and a focus position. And let's go over the 3. So a low-cost position is the idea that you're going to drive down costs in order to gain market share. Now, when I feel like a lot of this is a fairly old concept. Porter's strategy book was written in I think around 1980. You see similar stuff from, Boston Consulting Group's book on strategy and other things at the time. And I think when you just say, a focus on cost and cost leadership, it tends to make one think just the cheapest low price leader. Well, we've seen, especially with globalization, that, the cheapest stuff is often made outside of the country. And, for especially American companies to compete with each other, obviously they make things outside of the country. But in terms of low cost leadership, it has to be thought of as low cost leadership within a given standard of quality. So as one is driving down prices and driving down costs, so low cost leadership, yes, some of that should be passed on to the customer in the form of lower prices, but some of that should be passed on to the customer in terms of increased quality. So I think the low cost leader that Porter identifies is really more of a, not just a cheap price thing, but more of an overall value thing. So that's number 1, the low cost leader. Number 2 is differentiation, which means that through marketing efforts, research and development, etc., you are developing some way of differentiating your product from other products. And focus is an interesting generic strategy because it kind of can combine low cost and differentiation. So focus is, instead of serving the market as a whole or even a broad spectrum of the market, you are very focused on a certain segment of the market, and as a result, you can either differentiate yourself or develop a low-cost structure within that specific focused market. So let's go kind of into these individually. So the low cost, a great example and a common example would be a Walmart. So, what does Walmart do? They provide retail service in a broad spectrum of products. Everything from hardware to clothes to food nowadays, and they're ever expanding. What they do is they drive down their price structure to offer a certain level of quality at the lowest possible price. Now, Walmart, if you go into a Walmart versus a Dollar Tree, they both offer a wide variety of goods and many overlapping goods, but I think we'd all agree that the quality of Walmart is definitely superior to a Dollar Tree. So that's kind of one strategy. Whereas, for general retailing, Walmart has developed a cost structure by managing costs, driving down supplier prices, developing an amazing supply chain that causes them to be able to turn their inventory very rapidly. They've been able to pass those savings at the given quality level onto the customer and are pretty dominant in that position, to the point where, they're I guess you could compare, like a Target to a Walmart. In the past, you would have compared a Sears and a Kmart to the Walmart. Walmart has just been so dominant, especially relative to general retailers like your Sears and your Kmarts, that they've essentially drove them out of the marketplace. And now Walmart is even expanding their general market to include multi-channel retailing. And by multi-channel, I mean you're not just going to the store, you're also ordering online as well from them, because they're competing with Amazon in that retail space. So, but that's your low cost differentiator. They drive their costs down and are able to pass that along to customers with a combination of price and value. So differentiation is, I can't help but think of differentiation in terms of, branding, and there's no easier way to illustrate that than luxury branding. So let's be honest that certain luxury brands probably have more quality than their more low-priced competitors, but they have a brand name through marketing, reputation, mystique, etc., that allows them to charge much higher margins than anyone else they're competing with. Because they differentiate themselves on a combination of quality and luxury. So let's pick one. Rolex. Are Rolex watches, that much better than say the Michael Kors watch that you would buy yourself at Nordstrom, or even a Casio or something like that? Well, yeah, they're definitely mechanically better. But I would also say there's certain very mechanically sound watches that don't command near the price of Rolex. Why? Rolex differentiates itself on luxury, and they've built that up over the years through, first of all, they differentiate themselves on quality. They certainly do have a higher quality than those brands I mentioned and other ones. But they've also differentiated themselves on luxury through their marketing and their branding. And luxury, definitely, that's going to start with a reference to quality. And that's kind of, how a lot of these luxury brands differentiate themselves. Car manufacturers. Is a Mercedes, a lot better quality, especially at its high ends, than, say, a Honda Accord? Absolutely. But what's interesting is Mercedes differentiates itself on that quality and that brand, but that also trickles down to higher margins for them at more comparable cars. So, your lower level Mercedes, I think that's the E series. For BMW, that'd be the 3 Series. Are those cars that much structurally better than, say, a Honda Accord? Especially a fully decked out Honda Accord? I would argue no, not much at all. But they're much more expensive. Why is that? Well, number one, BMW and Mercedes, because of their cost structure, they can't compete with Honda if price is the sheer the sheer driving factor at a certain quality level. So you could argue that the Honda Accord and the BMW 3 Series, the Mercedes E Series, or is it maybe it's the Mercedes 230 Series. I'm just wrong. I don't know my cars. I'm sorry. But anyway, whatever that low-end Mercedes is, they're all very comparable to a Honda Accord or a Hyundai Elantra or something like that in terms of features, in terms of general quality. But there is a certain differentiation that BMW and Mercedes have had over the years, especially due to their quality and their luxury branding at those higher end levels. So they're able to compete in the low end sedan market, even though they can't possibly compete on cost structure with those import type cars. It's a differentiation factor. Okay, let's move on to focus. So we've talked about low cost leadership, we've talked about differentiation. Focus is an interesting thing because what you're doing is focusing on a very specific market segment within a broader market that allows you to develop either low cost leadership or differentiation. So let's stick with our car example and take Tesla. What does Tesla compete in? specifically electric cars. That is a very focused market right now. Cars sold in the US, a very low percentage of them are electric cars, but a very high percentage of those, at least right now, are Tesla cars because there's not many competing in that market. Now, Tesla, they are highly focused because they just do electric cars, but at the same time, they differentiate themselves as more of a luxury electric car model, because there definitely are other electric cars out there. And what I said earlier, that most of them are sold are Teslas, I don't know that that's correct, and I'd have to look that up, because I know even the big three auto manufacturers have versions of electric cars that are cheaper than the Tesla version. But Tesla has definitely differentiated itself on a combination of luxury and high quality that allows them to be very successful within their given focus, which is the electric car market. And also, when you think of electric cars, if a Tesla is competing against, say, a Ford that has a similar quality structure, well, in the customer's mind, Tesla is differentiated enough in that focused sector that they benefit from that differentiation. Likewise, if Mercedes were to come into the electric car structure, the electric car market, I doubt that they have the scale to manufacture at the same cost as Tesla. And Mercedes' luxury differentiation wouldn't matter as much in the electric car focused market, and Tesla would probably win out at that. So in some ways, they're both a differentiated competitor and a low-cost competitor within that focused electric car market. So Focus is interesting because it can combine factors of low cost and differentiation all within the same company. So in sum, you've got three generic strategies that a company can pursue: a low cost, a differentiated, and a focused market. Now, depending on your company's size, some of these may not be available for you. If you're a small business, you probably want to try and avoid a low cost structure, particularly if there's other competitors. If you're sitting there, starting a general retailer, it probably, you're gonna have a hard time competing with Walmart. But there are examples of retailers that have come into the marketplace in, say, the last 10 years that have been focused and have allowed themselves to gain significant market share. So in Texas, a good example is Buc-ee's. Buc-ee's is a general retailer. They, if you compare them to Walmart, they are in the general retailer business, but they're very Texas-centric, Texas-focused, and only focus on specific products that appeal to Texans, and particularly Texans traveling by a Buc-ee's, so that we go and get our gas there, which I always do whenever we're traveling by a Buc-ee's, because my kids love it and they want to go in there. And frankly, I do buy a lot of stuff in there because it's Texas-centric. For smaller businesses, a focused approach is probably the best approach, because in one way or another, it'll allow you to be differentiated or gain a low cost structure because you're focused on the needs of a particular market or set of customers, and that will allow you to compete with much larger companies. So, you constantly hear, globalization this, large corporations that. One of the things smaller businesses just need to think about is, when you go into it, you're not going to be able to compete with those large companies. What is the focus that you can do that will then allow you to either differentiate yourself or provide low-cost leadership within a broader market? So hope that helped. That's kind of Michael Porter's 3 generic strategies.